Destroying the rainforest for economic gain is like burning a Renaissance painting to cook a meal. I just think that's brilliant. And the talk I'm going to just spearhead today is about a year's worth of 4 hour each workshops. And I've shortened it to 20 minutes. I'm going to talk really fast. No, I'm not. I just want to share some ideas with you of what a lot of us do that rely on a lot of this open source data. This is another sort of a scary topic, but environmental racism is it's a jumping off point to understand that there are built infrastructure issues that contribute to where people live, access they have to resources, and locked land use systems that persist from like the early 1900s. A lot of times we think the redlining and all of that was climbing towards 100 years ago. Aren't we over that? And when you realize, and we're going to look at some of these aspects of it, that it persists in ways that are quiet and in ways not so quiet. Now, in case you're not a geospatial analyst, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about geospatial analytics in exactly 2 slides. I just think this is hysterical. So maybe that's the first qualifier. The two types of data, raster and vector, are basically what we look at when we're doing geospatial analysis. We have like polygons and extents and things like that. And then we have raster images that come from the satellites that are like bands and all that kind of exciting stuff. And that's where the real mathy stuff lives that I love. So this is your 101 course. And then I came into geography through the back door, basically. I was a healthcare analyst and I looked at data from the huge health records and everything. And I was just curious. I was like, what am I supposed to do with this race column? I don't get it. It's a very poor biologic construct for anything. It's more of a social construct. And I wasn't being cheeky. I just was like, what do you want me to do with it? And I started looking at location. Where were these clinics located? Where were these patients living? What was their environment like? If they live 10 minutes from a highway and there's pollution runoff and high levels of ozone, maybe those clinics have higher rates of asthma. And I'll be darned if they didn't. I started lecturing big health systems and a lot of the medical campuses, and we were actually putting the data layer of location and these persistent barriers over where these clinics were seeing upticks in different types of diagnoses. And it really did there was a high probability that it was amazing to see. Regarding the first law is what everybody talks about. And to me, it's the things that are closer or more similar. But then if you think about it, if you're thinking about communities or counties, right? If your school's here, your hospital's here, the people live here, and the water treatment plant is here, proximity is going to tell you a little more about how related some things are. So now you're all honorary geospatial analysts. The second one, though, I love, and I'm going to be honest, because I wasn't trained up as a geospatial analyst. I was looking for a tool to answer very complex questions I was trying to deal with. And when I saw this, I was like, this is it. The phenomenon external to an area of interest affects what goes on inside. That's exactly what we're all looking at, right? We're looking at environmental, we're looking at structural determinants of health that influence the social determinants of health. And who am I? Here's my pedigree, and then we'll move on quickly. I am a exercise scientist, chiropractor who did a thesis in population genetics and then became a applied analyst through executive online education at Food School of Engineering at Columbia. This is stuff that anybody can do. All you need to do is be curious. And I'll share on the last slide that I'm on, not to sell you books, but the idea that somebody who knew nothing about Python 2 years ago can take it step by step and learn how to use geospatial tools. You can learn SQL, just ways to access a lot of this open source data. We talk about accessibility quite often, but we don't always say, okay, there it is. Now what are you going to do with it? So this is really what spatial statistics is, because you all know, I don't want to burst any bubbles here, but the Earth is not flat. And because of this, yeah, I know he's what? There's only so much you could do. You have to look at different coordinate systems. Things are influenced by the curvature of the Earth and where you are on the Earth. And so the data changes and we have spatial transform analytics and all that kind of stuff that makes it really fun. And this book has a great premise. And what I loved about it is if you are a data analyst, these buckets here are topics of open source. There's significant open source data in all of these buckets. And the long path idea is instead of accepting what we can do as a political term, whatever that might be, 4 years, 2 years, whatever your length of term is, or a lifespan. Let's not bookend this thing. Let's think the long haul. Don't think of the planet as only being here for our purposes, correct? This is a great little story that he has here that really did a little bit of my perspective because I didn't like being the doom and gloom person that shows up and says, look at your community. It's trash. We're all going to die. I want to show people that there's a way forward. And most of us in this room, if not all of us, are on that path, right? Did I not do? Oh, spacebar, not touchpad. How many brains does it take to start I hit this?
Hopefully just two.
It's the touchpad. What I'm showing you here as we get it queued up, because it does work, is in the rainforest, a lot of times we look at satellite images and we don't know exactly what we're looking at. And what I liked about this is what started my research because I was just scanning, looking at Landsat and just even Copernicus and all the other. Is it moving?
Press space.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
This is worth the wait, and I'll talk really fast to make up for it. I just want you to see it in case you're at home and you're curious and you haven't seen anything like this before. What we're looking at, it's a time lapse. There it goes. And we're looking at the Brazilian rainforest. So as it slides towards me, you're seeing what we've done to it. And it'll go back the other way too. But what you see here is everything that's lit up is something, right? It's a land use, and this is only 4 years. And just pay close attention to the upper right corner. That's the area that I'm going to be focused on as I look at and talk about what's going on. This isn't someone's opinion. This isn't somebody rattling a saber and saying, gotta save the rainforest. This is like fact. Yes. Phew, sorry. This always happens. Put all these things in here knowing that it's going to be like this. Now, this is one of the tools, open access tools, Google, excuse me, Earth Engine, where you can go in, write a lot of code. Y'all with me on that? And generate, you can look across the world, but this is the same location that I talked about, right over here. And you're just really looking at the signals from the data that are saying, like, you're looking at the bands, the on or off, basically the pixelation in the area, and you're determining that we've lost forest, red, we've gained it, green, or we haven't lost it, green. And this is, if you think about it, anyone could just stumble upon here if they know, if you're JavaScript, but even if you don't, there are ways to get this information with minimal coding experience. And I just did a blow up of it because I think it's pretty. But it's sad but pretty because you can see all these areas and you can get curious about what's happening under the surface. And this is that same region because even in Brazil, there's a very good catalog of the vegetation in the area. So we know what's going on here and we know what's happening on these other layers. You can't read this, get it, but you could see the pretty colors. Like the green is the Amazonian rainforest, the lungs of the planet kind of a thing. And then you see the other areas that are marked out there. And then this now is that same image, but we're looking at a satellite image. And what you're noticing here with these pretty colors, these are the indigenous populations that live here. So what you're seeing is in this area that we were talking about up here, we have a lot of people that are impacted that might not be big fans of what's going on in the rainforest. And this is all open source data from OpenStreetMap. And then what I decided to do here is just to show you a little bit of that built infrastructure, all the yellow, the roads that have been put in here. So as you can see, if you look in the center top, you can see all the road networks here. And you might see them here and here. And if you're like me, you're like, what's there? A Starbucks? What's happening? We're going to find out in a minute. Right here, these are railroads that are put in, some railways. And I just made them black and distinct so they could pop for you if you're looking at this from home. And then I dropped out all the cover underneath so you could see those are the same native populations that we were looking at. And you may be noticing, what's all that black dots and scatter that you see on here? And what this is, right here specifically, these are all land use. So what I did is I took the open source data, I color coded it for land use, look bad, commercial bad, industrial, mill bad, not bad, but like where they're being built. And I put them on the map so that you could see, like, these things seem to be a little close to a lot of the native populations and not so much in the other areas. And these are just questions. I'm not here to place a value judgment. I'm just here to say, isn't that curious? And then what I did is I blew up a bit of a satellite image on the left, lower left in the pop out here. And what you see right here is what's going on right here. There's a red splotch that you see on the lower quadrant here of the pop out. And then if you go over to the pink, the lower left corner of the pink, the para state, you could see that. And I blew it up and it's a mine. These are all mines. They're mining all the minerals. And you don't have to know a lot to know how destructive mining can be on a community. So this is what was generating a lot of those lights that you saw on the original image that I showed you. If you look at the light pink on the map, you'll see a long, looks like Manhattan on an angle, and you'll see just a whole bunch of black scatter around it. And that's what I've highlighted here in the left side of the picture. Who recognizes this? There you go. Same stuff that we can learn from, right? We're looking at here, if you notice the darker areas, the darker area. Now, I don't know, if you look at it and you pinch off your carotid and get a little dizzy, you can see a Y shape here of the white. This is water, and you'll see in the hook of it is the dark. And what we're looking at here are impervious surfaces, which are always important to drop down and look at impervious surfaces when you're looking at communities and neighborhoods, because that's where you have a lot of the flooding. That's where there's no carbon sequestration, there's not a lot of green space, and you don't expect it that much in DC, but we do a nice job of putting little green spaces in the nation's capital. But what I want to point you towards, if you're looking at this, if you see the right branch of the Y, okay, so there's the Y, the right branch. I wish I could show it to you at home, but I think you can see it if you've stared at it long enough. Below this river are the 7th and 8th ward, the worst performing and highest rate of poverty wards in Washington, D.C. And so I just wanted to point you towards the imperviousness of the soil, what that means. A lot of asphalt, a lot of parking lots, a lot of buildings, and all of that. And what we're looking at here on the left, the darker, like little polka dotted stuff in the upper northwest, those are first grade areas. So back in the 1930s, there was an underwriter's manual where the government would say who could get a mortgage and who would not. And if they were mortgages have not always been funded by banks, right? You were on your own kind of, if you could get a house. And then they decided, well, gosh, if we're going to have these mortgages, we want to go in and we want to be able to check our investment and see what our risk is. So they went in, they looked around, and they're like, oh, whew, a lot of immigrants here. This is not going to be top tier. They looked at Black populations. That was the lowest. And then they gave ratings. And this is what they mean by redlining, if you've heard these things, that I mentioned it in the beginning. And so when you look at these areas, you could track it over pretty much to modern day. Now, on the right, what we're looking at is restrictions, deed restrictions. So what that means is you may have a house, but you can't deed it to a person of color. And it's a little more complicated than all that. But I wanted to show you that there's a lot of ways of looking at these areas. And I want your point of reference to be that why that I showed you. If you're not here with us and can't see where I'm pointing, you can see that's a big delineator towards the population. Here it is again, big and blown up for the people in the cheap seats. The yellow here is minority populations. You pick a level, like if it's 72% more of a certain race, then it gets put over in their category. The yellow is black, and you could do that Y again, and you can see the locked in land use, and you can see the persistent barriers that are present there. And then just to make it fun, I thought I'd look at guns. And if you look below the Y, look for the blue, look below it right here, you could see how concentrated these things are. And you look a little more closer. This is for my purposes of showing you, but if the data supports what I'm showing you. And I did it a little, again here, blocking out the back a little bit. So when you look here, you see the scattering, and you can see on the left vertical panel some of the choices I made. And I can mix this up. I can deselect, select, I can pick different populations, I can pick different employment forecasts, and I can look around. This is in QGIS, by the way, open source data processing, free to use today. And I can get just a look over where people are living, where's this violence happening, and then I can go there and look around. What could be contributing to this? And this was like a great find. This is the EPA, a little company called NASA down there at the bottom. And if you look, this is so deep, this catalog of the different things. I noted it so you could be, that's pretty. But you're looking at so many different things. You're looking at hot zones. If you have a lot of impervious surface, you're not cooling and you're having a hotter temperature in these areas. And this can lead to poor health outcomes. And we're looking at a lot of other things. Ozone levels. Ozone is an easy measure of like pollution runoff. If you're near highways, if you're near anything industrial, even commercial, there's going to be higher levels of this, and the EPA monitors this, and you can track this right down to the wards, and this works in most places. And you can see all these other measures that are in the EnviroAtlas data, open source. And here I kind of made it just a little more easier to look at so you can see what's going on. But you can look at agriculture is really important back in the Brazilian data I was showing you, because under the current administration, Bolsonaro in Brazil, it's like they're having a swap meet in the Brazilian Amazon forest. Oh, you want some agriculture? Land's being given away, and they have this really nifty policy that if you don't have any indigenous people on the land, you could just take it and farm it. How do you think they remove the people that they do find? They are forcibly removed, they're murdered, and this is all things you can find, and it's all in the news and in the media, locally and here. And I just wanted to pop this out for you so you could see this is all the open source data that I'm talking about. We can look in our community. We can look anywhere where we have an interest in trying to find out why are these outcomes looking the way they are. So when I was going to a lot of these healthcare systems, my job was to go in and not make suggestions, just shine a little light on some potential contributions to some of the outcomes they were seeing that weren't consistent across the geographic areas that they served. And I had to get one more of these in. This brings it all together. This is beautiful. I think I made this on ArcGIS online, but there's a free API. If you know how to code, you can get in and access a lot of this data. And this is poverty status. You can see the dense, if you look for your Y again, that's why I picked DC, because it's local to us and because there's this distinct thing you can look at for resources. You can see below it, that dark swath, that's where the highest poverty rates are. So you can see the continuity with these wards. And the futures is plural. Like we're as close to 2400 as are to the Roman Empire crumbling. You have to think along those things. It's not just, yeah, do the math. I just wanted to show you, like, here, we could be here. We have different futures and different scales of how we might want to address them. There's no right way to get there. There's just lots of ways, and we just need to pick one. If you see this, raise your hand. If anyone sees it, and when you see it, if you see it, raise your hand. It's my last slide of substance. Now I'm going to tell you what you're not looking at and what you are looking at. This is a cow. Does that help? Here's an ear, another ear, an eyeball. Raise your hand if you're seeing it now. Now you see the cow. Now, if somebody shows this to you in 3 years, you can't not see this cow. You just can't. So that's my goal for what we discussed and talked about today in the little bit of time we had together, is that you don't forget the cow.